Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Dirt Diaries. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss a new episode or new archaeological discovery. If you're listening to this as a podcast, don't forget to like and rate, helps me out. And if you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to like and comment as it helps me out there too. And if you're new here, welcome. I hope you love ancient history, archaeology, mythology, mystery, and more as much as I do. Because my name is Dr. Teninger Kallenberger and I bring the ancient world to you. Because no, this is not ancient aliens. This is the real thing. And of course, these are the Dirt Diaries. And last time on Dirt Diaries, well, we went over ancient pendants that brought protection to their wearers during the past. From New Kingdom Egypt to the weighing of the heart ceremony, to the Byzantine Empire with depictions of Solomon smiting a demon down, and even a 10th century representation of Thor's hammer, we covered it all. But which one was your favorite? And for today, as you no doubt saw from the title already, we have reached our season finale, which I cannot thank you all enough for your support this season, especially to those on YouTube as I'm trying to really build up the audience there. Thank you all for being part of the Dirt Diaries. And I feel like I need a fun name for you guys. So drop below what I should call you guys, because I feel like you guys need a fun little name. I don't know if I'll ever beat Dr. Howard Williams, who is known as Archaeodeath, because his followers are known as Archaeodeathlings, which I don't know if I'll ever be able to beat something as cool as that. So much like last year and season 1, we are closing the tomb and burying 2025. But it wouldn't be the end of the season if we didn't chat about some of our favorite archaeological finds together. And there are so many. My original list for what to talk about for this episode rivaled Santa Claus's own list. Because, spoiler alert, I loved them all. Shocker, I know. And yes, as always, I will be getting ready with you all today just to keep my hands busy as we talk ruins, artifacts, and more to make your day suck less. So grab your shovels, your petiches, and more, because we're closing the tomb on 2025. Alrighty, first up, and in no particular order, other than simply just being where they're geographically located. Because yes, just like last year, I will be ranking my favorite at the end. We are starting with the frescoed banquet hall that was found in Pompeii this year. This year in February, archaeologists who were working, of course, at the site of Pompeii made an incredible discovery that adds to our understanding of Dionysian mystery cults and possible initiation scenes. Now, in this banquet hall, archaeologists uncovered life-sized frescoes. And of course, if you are looking for more on the mystery cult of Dionysus or the earlier Dionysian find from the 20th century, look no further because yes, this year I did do a whole deep dive on the Villa of the Mysteries. You can catch that whole episode out wherever you are listening to this, whether it be on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube. But for this find, I mean, wow, what a find, because this is the first Dionysian fresco find in over 100 years. And I kind of spoiled it already, but yes, the previous discovery was in the Villa of the Mysteries, specifically in room 5 there, where we see the possible scenes of initiation going on. Now, this room and the art inside of it, so the banquet hall, dates to the 1st century BCE, and if you're wondering what specific Pompeian style it is painted in, it is actually painted in the 2nd Pompeii style. And for those wondering, there are a total of 4 Pompeian styles of wall paintings. And this banquet hall was actually uncovered in the house of Theasis in Pompeii's Regio IX. Now remember, Regio IX is really a more suburban area. There have been a lot of massive archaeological discoveries from Regio IX. And in the banquet hall, we see 3 completely decorated walls, and a 4th wall would have been there, but it doesn't survive today. And that wall kind of would have been a little bit more open because you would have been able to leave the room and enter actually into the courtyard of the massive villa here. And on these paneled painted walls, we see followers of Dionysus, like the Maenads, who are female followers of Dionysus, who, yes, in legend and mythology are said to actually work themselves up into such a frenzy that they are known to rip men apart. And here, the Maenads are actually being represented not only as dancers, as they normally are in ancient artwork, but they're also being depicted as hunters And we know this because they are carrying swords. So they are either doing a ritualistic hunt, which may be part of the larger initiation scene going on here. And prior to this, we really never see them depicted in this kind of way. So this art is not only incredible because of its beautiful preservation, but because it's adding into the corpus of Roman art that we never knew existed before, especially with the mythological figures being depicted here. Now, in the scene, we also see younger satyrs being represented. Again, they are known followers of Dionysus. In these little, I guess you could call them like vignettes, or these little panels or these scenes, you can see that they are playing musical instruments, and they are also depicted as pouring libations. And on top of many of these little vignette scenes or these panels are depictions of massive, almost kind of platters of different animals that may be being prepared for ritualistic feasting. Some have a plethora of seafood, including eels. Some have roosters and more. Now, before the entire banquet hall with the Dionysian scenes were actually fully reported on, we got an earlier update about this room back at the end of 2024, very, very late in 2024. But by that point, archaeologists working here had only really dug down to the bottom of the feasting scenes on top of the vignettes. So we really only had these depictions of tons of food, tons of seafood, roosters that are being prepped for feasting and banqueting. We had no idea what laid underneath until archaeologists working here continued to dig down in beautiful layers, because yes, that's how archaeologists dig. We dig down very systematically using, layers. That way we see beautiful stratigraphy and we can date everything. We love it. We're not all like Heinrich Schliemann who, dug with dynamite in one hand and the Iliad and the Odyssey in the other. But I will also say, back in really the early periods of archaeology, at the site of Akrotiri on modern-day Santorini, when excavations were first going on here, the excavator, Spirited Marinatos, I believe it was, he actually tunneled his way through Akrotiri. So that's really interesting if you want to take a little rabbit dive into that during, the holiday season this December. And it is actually when archaeologists continued digging down that the rest of the room and all of these panels revealed themselves. And we see Maenads, Silenus figures who are elder satyr figures, again, very well-known companions of the god Dionysus. And in one panel, we actually have a elder Silenus figure, and he is leading a young woman. They're standing right next to each other. He's much shorter than she. She has a beautiful updo, and she is in kind of a dark blue, greenish dress. And I mean, the preservation here is just absolutely stunning. And this elder Silenus figure who is in this panel, well, scholars and archaeologists actually believe that he is leading this young woman through an initiation scene into the mystery cult of Dionysus. Now, scholars are instantly drawing connections with this panel to similarities that they are seeing with the panel that is known as the bridal toilet from the Villa of the Mysteries. Now, the bridal toilet shows a young woman, and she's either taking her hair out of an updo or she's trying to put it up. And she's sitting on a small seat, and she is wearing a beautiful yellow dress. And yellow dresses were actually worn by brides in the Roman world. And in this panel, we also see a little Cupid figure holding up a mirror for her so that she can continue to get ready. So archaeologists and scholars working here are believing that these two panels are very similar, that these are depicting young women who may be getting initiated into the mystery cult. Or if not an initiation, she may be undergoing another ritual in the cult. Now, this entire scene, the entire banquet hall, as a whole narrative is utterly fascinating because we see scenes and motifs that recall life, death, and rebirth. which those three themes are massive components and themes in mystery cults throughout the ancient world and throughout antiquity. We see it in the mysteries of Eleusis, the Eleusinian mysteries for Persephone and Demeter. We see it in the Mithraic cult, the cult of Mithras. We see it in the cult of Isis, which was also celebrated at Pompeii, and so many more. And this banquet hall is painted on a red background, which is really, really similar to what we see in the Villa of the Mysteries. Now, not only are we seeing aspects that have ties to life, death, and rebirth, but with the scenes of hunting, dancing, frivolity, and more, we are also seeing that this narrative holds aspects of chaos, control, losing control, and more that one might actually experience within the larger cult of Dionysus. He was seen as the one who could really take off the mask of his followers so that they could experience almost their true selves, which of course, as a god of wine, could be experienced through the drinking of alcoholic beverages back in his cult. Now, moving on to another incredible find from Pompeii that came out this year, comes from the house of Helle and Phrixus. And just like other houses in Pompeii, it is named because of what has been discovered there. So, for example, House of the Golden Bracelet, named as such because a golden bracelet was found there. House of the Small Fountain, you guessed it, a small fountain was found there. So the House of Helle and Phrixus is named as such, not because the owners were named Helle and Phrixus. No. But it's because of the beautiful mythological scene that is depicted in fresco on one of the walls inside the house that depicts the myth of Helle and Phrixus. So break out your mythology books real quick for this one, because Helle and Phrixus, well, in mythology, their stepmother, I know, and pardon my pronunciation on that, well, she hates her stepchildren, and she's really trying to get them. So they are really on the run from their stepmother. And as they are on the run, a ram with golden fleece actually appears, and they hop on to try and get to safety. And the ram with the golden fleece is actually sent by their birth mother. Now, during their journey back to safety, it's unclear how, but unfortunately, Helle seemingly almost loses grip from where she is seated, and she falls from the ram into the water between Europe and Asia from the myth, and unfortunately, she drowns. And it's a really kind of crazy demise. But thankfully, her brother does survive. And once he makes it to safety, he actually comes into contact with King Aeetes. Now, as thanks for taking him in, showing him hospitality, all of that good stuff, well, Phrixus gifts King Aeetes the golden fleece, right? Great. So this is kind of where the ending gets a little foggy, you can say, because we have multiple endings that you all can pick from. So one of the endings in mythology tells us that King Aeetes has an oracle come, and the oracle tells him that somebody from the line of Phrixus is going to kill him and is ultimately going to be his demise in a much riddled oracle way. So King Aeetes, who was not going to sit around and let that happen, well, he simply just kills Phrixus to ensure, hey, your line ends with you. Great. But there is another ending, that of Phrixus simply dying of old age, which, because it's Greek mythology, I'm a little bit more inclined to believe the former rather than the latter, because rarely ever in Greek mythology is there actually a happy ending. There really is no story of, and they lived happily ever after. We don't really see that in Greek mythology. So knowing how prophecies go in Greek mythology, I personally believe it's going to be the one where Phrixus is killed. But that's just me. So which one do you guys think? Now, the house of Helle and Phrixus was actually pretty recently discovered. It was discovered back in excavations during 2019. And they found this house because they were digging, I believe, right next door or a few doors down at the house of Leda and the Swan. And they came across this house and the beautiful frescoed walls inside. And really, we were reintroduced to Helle and Phrixus. Now, the newest excavations that are going on in this house, which are, yes, now published, found and pieced together really the final moments of a family who sought refuge in one of the bedrooms in this house. And they sought refuge here by all gathering together in this room, and they actually barricaded the door closed with a bed. Now, during excavations, archaeologists were actually able to create a plaster cast from the empty space that the organic material leaves behind when you are digging at Pompeii or Herculaneum, or any site that was actually covered by a volcanic eruption. So archaeologists found a bed was placed in front of the door, and they likely sought refuge here because they thought that the eruption was going to be over soon, which I don't blame them for. Now, when we're talking about the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in late October of 79 CE, we know that the eruption covered Pompeii, Herculaneum, and more. But Mount Vesuvius is actually categorized as a stratovolcano, meaning it is actually known for having violent eruptions due to the magma underneath having a higher gas level, which over time builds more and more pressure so that when there is an eruption, it is going to be more violent than others. And not only would I say more violent, but it's going to be more explosive. And we have to remind ourselves that the eruption was not just one and done. It was not just we're done. No, there's actually two phases of the eruption. So phase one is really categorized by that first explosion where the volcanic ash material and more is launched into the atmosphere, right? During this time, ash and more begins raining down on everything underneath. And during this time, as the ash and more begins to build up on top of buildings, roofs, and more, we actually see that collapse begins to happen. And these collapses can trap anybody underneath. So likely during phase one is perhaps where this family decided to seek refuge in this bedroom, that they thought that they could wait it out. But during phase two, their fate was really sealed. Phase two is categorized by the pyroclastic flows. So think the almost kind of volcanic avalanches that are traveling at super fast speeds down the side of the volcano. And they are made up of volcanic ash, debris, and more. And it is scorching hot. And this volcanic avalanche, in so many words, is incinerating everything in its path, effectively covering these sites in some areas of over 20 feet of ash. So taking into account the phases and how long the eruption was, it was actually upwards of over 32 hours. And 32 hours is calculated, of course, because of the accounts that we do have from Pliny, but also from modern testing today. So in the room that was excavated, the remains of 4 individuals were uncovered, including that of a young child. And next to the remains of the child was a bulla. And we talked about bullas on the last episode of the Dirt Diaries with ancient amulets. So if you want more about bullas, definitely check that out. But SparkNote version is a bulla was just a protective amulet worn by young boys in Rome. And along with the human remains that were uncovered in this bedroom, elsewhere in the house, archaeologists also uncovered drinking vessels, a water basin, what they believe to be actually a banquet hall in the house, storage vessels, kitchen utensils, and more. But due to the absence of some decorations in certain areas of the villa, archaeologists and scholars are actually believing that the owners of this house were actually renovating certain areas. And this is not the first time nor the first house that we do have speculation that the owners were having renovations done on it. We see construction and renovations occurring at other places and other houses in Pompeii. One of them, I think, came out last year in 2024, it was that blue room that was discovered in Pompeii, known as the Sicarium. And it's finds like these that really pull on your heart because you really understand this family's final moments and their choices here, right? Here I can fully understand why they would gather in a bedroom, why they would barricade the door closed, because they thought it would actually help them. And when we look at the whole excavation and what was discovered in this house, the basically immortalized artwork that is still on the walls today is juxtaposed against the fragility of human life. And it's these finds that just continue to pull you in so many different emotional directions. For me specifically, such a cool find, right? Everything is beautifully preserved, the artwork, the house. But the other side of the preservation coin at Pompeii and Herculaneum is we also are able to see a family's final moments preserved. And there's something here that I think we can all relate to, that in times of emergency or duress, people will do anything to save themselves, family members, loved ones, and others, especially with what we saw last year or come out at the end of last year with the DNA analysis coming out from a few of the individuals who perished in the House of the Golden Bracelet, the one adult and the younger child, that they are not actually genetically related, but these people in their final moments sought to look after one another. And there's just something so human about it that we are able to show love and kindness and be protectors in times of uncertainty. And I think it's just a good reminder that we should all be trying to look out for one another, trying to care for one another as best as we can. But moving on to another incredible find that came out this year, we are still in Italy, but we are moving a little bit up north and moving further back in time because we are moving to another preservation miracle here, that of a 2,700-year-old Etruscan tomb. Now, this Etruscan tomb was completely untouched when archaeologists discovered it, and these archaeologists were working in the San Giuliano necropolis, which is about 70 kilometers outside of Rome. Now, these excavations uncovered a completely unopened, unlooted, and untouched chamber tomb, which, I love chamber tombs. Probably one of my favorite tombs. I think my favorite one of all is probably a Tholos tomb because they're just so cool. Anywho, this chamber tomb actually dates to the second half of what is known as the Orientalizing period in Etruscan history. And it's named as such because of a massive, really, trade influx between them, connecting them with Mesopotamia, cultures and societies in the further Eastern Mediterranean world, Greece, ancient Anatolia, Egypt, the Levant, Canaan, and more. And this is a pretty cool discovery in my own personal opinion. Why? Because in this area, in this region of Italy, archaeologists over the years have uncovered, tracked, reported over 500 Etruscan tombs, all of which were opened, destroyed, looted, and more. So a completely untouched tomb, no matter where you are in the world, is extremely rare. And this is really every archaeologist's dream, because when we discover a completely untouched tomb, everything is frozen in that moment in history. Funerary rites, funerary rituals, and more are forever immortalized. And it's finds like these that allow us as archaeologists, scholars, and more to learn more about this culture, the society, and more. For example, another famously untouched, undisturbed tomb comes from that of Tutankhamun. When Howard Carter discovered it back in 1922, that was a massive discovery. And it's even crazier because all of the tombs around his in the Valley of the Kings had been looted previously. So here in this Etruscan rock-cut chamber tomb, archaeologists and scholars are able to get the whole picture of the past rather than pieces. Inside the tomb, archaeologists uncovered funerary furniture arranged, as they noted, with care, which, again, I think it's something else that we can fully understand as people today, because when you are saying goodbye to a loved one, laying a loved one to rest, you are doing everything in your power to put their favorite items with them in the casket, to put their favorite flowers on their grave. You are doing things with care, just like ancient peoples were thousands of years ago. They also uncovered dozens of Etruscan geometric style ceramics, bronze ornaments, bronze weapons, yes, bronze weapons, a funerary bed, and more. The remains of 4 individuals were found. It has been reported that 2 pairs of males and 2 pairs of females have been recovered. We do not know if they are from the same family or anything, but DNA has actually been gathered from them to be sent off for testing. So fingers crossed we get an update about that. And since I don't actually think that we've talked about the Etruscans before, let's talk about them pretty briefly here, just in case you guys are curious little kitty cats. So briefly, a brief little history overview is that the Etruscan civilization really comes about around 800 BCE, give or take some change. And they are well known for their trade connections, their mineral resources, and yes, my personal favorite, funerary art, because as an art historian and archaeologist, in every single art history 101 history of art book that I've ever seen, and every art history class that I've had to take that talks about ancient art or art around the world, without a doubt, every time we always have to mention the sarcophagus of the spouses. You probably recognize this photo. It is in every art history textbook out there. And yes, is from the Etruscans. I love the little Etruscan smiles in their art. I just love it. It reminds me a lot of archaic Greek art with the archaic smiles that they have there. So moving on in Etruscan history, in the 4th century BCE, well, the Etruscans and the Romans, well, they begin to butt heads, to put it lightly. And then once we really enter the Hellenistic period, so post Alexander the Great, post 331 BCE, the Etruscans are actually battling not only the Romans more, but they are battling the Celts, and they're having skirmishes with those from Syracuse. And again, these fights, these skirmishes, these battles continue to pick up and pick up and pick up until around 27 BCE, when we see Rome kind of take in the last few Etruscan cities under Roman imperial control under the reign of Augustus, because that's when Rome transitions to the Roman Empire. Now, one final thing that I actually want to touch on before we move on to the next find is a question that I've actually gotten a lot this year concerning this tomb and other tombs that I talked about. And that is, why in the tomb photos do we see a lot of vessels, pottery, and more strewn about, fallen over, on their sides, all of that kind of stuff? Is it from earthquakes? And many of you actually thought earthquakes, which, yes, sometimes it can be earthquakes. So brownie points for you all. But as an archaeologist and art historian, I offer you another aspect that you may not be fully aware of, and that is funerary feasting, final funerary rites. And before I dive into that, first, I want you all to think about if you've ever had to go to a funeral in your life. You may have to go to a wake, a funeral, a celebration of life, anything like that. Afterwards, the family may go out for a dinner. They might host a meal afterwards for those who want to pay final respects. And during this time, with food and drink flowing around them, many people today will reminisce about stories and tales of their loved one. And the ancients did that too, because yes, as we saw in the ancient food episode this year, food and drink will always bring people together. So let's talk about funeral feasting and more, and how you can, in the future, potentially point it out and wow all of your friends. So when tombs are sealed, in this case, it's chamber tomb, but when tombs are sealed, individuals who are at the entryway that they're about to shut it, they may actually do one final cheers to the deceased individual, drink their drink, and throw their cups, vessels, and more onto the ground before they actually inter the individual. And I've seen this as far back in my own field as the early Bronze Age, specifically the early Minoan, I think it's early Minoan 1, the early Minoan cemetery of Ayafotia, which is on the north coast of Crete. And in some of these early chamber tombs, we have evidence of potential funerary feasting, ritual drinking before the individual is interred in the tomb. So yes, if you see vessels and more knocked over in graves, it may be seismic activity depending on where you are in the world. The Aegean world, the Mediterranean world is extremely seismically active. I mean, Italy itself is seismically active. We just talked about Pompeii. So yes, it may actually come from seismic activity, or it may be from ritualistic feasting. Now, from tombs, we are moving to an area associated with mythology for this next find. Specifically, it has to do with the famed Homeric hero and king of Ithaca. Yes, we're talking the sanctuary to Odysseus, which, yes, I know that many of you recently have been asking for a whole crash out and deep dive on my opinions on Christopher Nolan's Odyssey, as new photos have recently made it into the news. And because I have spoken many a time on the ancient weaponry, helmets, and more, but just know that next season, yes, I will be doing a whole deep dive and really showing you guys what Nolan is missing from the Bronze Age and from really the Homeric world, and what we actually have from the archaeological record. But I am personally waiting for the whole trailer to come out, therefore I can critique it as a whole. But if you are interested, I've critiqued the round shields, I've critiqued the frescoes in the background, I've critiqued the helmets, I've critiqued the dress that we see Penelope wearing. I'm going to be critiquing the throne, the pillars, and so much more. Because yes, what in the Bronze Age are we looking at, Christopher, if I may? And also, before I go on to talk about this find, I don't understand his tagline for the Odyssey. I don't understand it. Defy the gods, Christopher, Mr. Nolan, if I may. Have you read Greek mythology? Defying the gods is probably the biggest no-no. I mean, I don't want spoiler alert, but like Odysseus's travels and adventures home from Troy are not the easiest, because he does sometimes go against the gods, go against, Athena, who he has his favor, but he pokes the Cyclops, I should say, with Polyphemus, and ticks Poseidon off. So I don't even know. And even his crew, spoiler alert, they defy the gods and piss Helios off. So, Mr. Nolan, I'm a little confused. But I will save the crash out for when I do a whole deep dive. Anywho, let's talk about the really cool archaeological discovery that, yes, does have ties to Odysseus, because I need to calm down. So as I said earlier, this incredible archaeological discovery comes from the island of Ithaca, which is located off the western side of Greece today, off mainland Greece, I should say. So yes, back in the ancient day and time, it's believed that it was, like many other sites, under the control of the Mycenaeans, because on the mainland they were really the power in the later Bronze Age. So researchers and scholars here have identified what they believe to be the sanctuary of Odysseus, and they believe it to be located in the school of Homer, known as Ios Athanasios. And this is actually located on the northern part of the island. And what's interesting here is that this area in the school of Homer has been known about since the 19th century. So this area has been well known for quite some time. The area is centered around a large rocky outcrop with two terraces that are connected through stone staircases. And these new excavations have also pushed back the timeline of human activity on this island back to the final Neolithic period. So think late 5th millennium BCE into the early 4th millennium BCE. And this is thanks to ceramics and flint tools. Archaeologists working here also uncovered Mycenaean pottery, and an underground cistern, which uses a corbelling technique that was likely used during the Mycenaean palatial period. So in easy terms, think late Bronze Age. Now you may be thinking or even saying out loud to yourself, well, if people have known about this or had inklings and suspicions that this is where the sanctuary of Odysseus was since the 19th century, why is this news? And that's a fair point. It's a fair comment to make. But in the realm of archaeology, we cannot say something is for certain if we don't have enough evidence. And archaeologists working here finally got, in their opinion, enough evidence to make this claim. So, some of the new evidence also comes from inscriptions, which we love. These two new inscriptions, which date to the late Hellenistic period. So, Hellenistic period is post-Alexander the Great to 31 BCE. So think the back end of that. So think post 150 BCE. And in these inscriptions, we see Odysseus mentioned. He's mentioned once in the genitive, which tells us possession. And the other time that we see Odysseus is in the dative, which is telling us who it's about. So an example of the genitive is the sanctuary of Odysseus. And an example of the dative, using again the word Odysseus, could be the ancient peoples built a sanctuary for Odysseus. Now, what's really interesting about these inscriptions is that they beautifully aligned with another inscription that was discovered back in the 1930s in the Polis Bay cave, where archaeologists found an inscription that translates to, and I don't mean to laugh, but this inscription from the 1930s translates to, "Thanks, Odysseus," which I absolutely love. Archaeologists and scholars during excavations this season also uncovered a miniature bronze bust of the famed hero. They found multiple ritual artifacts, which includes dozens of clay votives, loom weights, over 100 coins from multiple Greek city-states, which highlights that many were possibly making pilgrimages to this ancient site to venerate this Homeric hero. And the coins actually date from around 330 BCE to 200 CE. So very, very active for a long time. So not only did the archaeologists and scholars find evidence of hero worship here, but they also found some references to Apollo Aegeus, pardon my pronunciation, which is an aspect of him as the protector of the streets, which, if you know what Apollo is god of and has associations to, this does make a lot of sense because Apollo, as the golden son of Zeus, he actually has associations to state formation and more. So it would make sense that he would have an epithet or an aspect like this. And it's finds like these that are so utterly fascinating, not only because we have evidence of hero worship, but because we are seeing archaeological ties to mythology. We are seeing how important the hero cult of Odysseus was to people long after the Homeric hero returned home. Spoiler alert, but yeah, he does return home. And these ruins today are our symbolic tie between heroes of myth and here and now. And moving on to another find that seems to almost live in a myth itself. Yes, one of the ancient wonders of the world is still turning up more archaeological finds. So we gotta talk the new lighthouse discoveries. This summer, archaeologists working in Alexandria pulled over 20 giant granite blocks from the water that once made up part of the famed lighthouse of Alexandria. These 22 blocks weigh between 80 and 90 tons, so between 160,000 and 180,000 pounds. And these were brought out of the water for the first time by using boats, cranes, platforms, and more. It was a whole big to-do. And the Pharaoh's project heading this is actually working on creating a digital replica of the ancient lighthouse. And they are doing this almost 60 years on after the first discoveries of the lighthouse of Alexandria were actually pulled from the water and identified by an archaeologist and diver in the area. The rediscovery of the lighthouse of Alexandria provides us today with physical evidence and remains of this legendary wonder and legendary monument that guided people and boats to safety for over 1,000 years. And these blocks also offer scholars and archaeologists a unique opportunity to understand the construction and more. Currently, the database that Pharos has begun has scanned over 100 blocks that were once part of the legendary lighthouse. And yes, these new 22 blocks will be added into their database. They will be scanned by using photogrammetry, which if you've ever done photogrammetry, it's hard. And they will use this to create a three-dimensional model of the individual block that they will then piece together into the much larger project itself of reconstructing this ancient monument. Now, if you've ever been to Alexandria or find yourself going to Egypt, some of the earliest blocks from the Lighthouse of Alexandria that were pulled from the water actually reside in the Kom el Daka archaeological site, with more of it now underneath and part of the Kate Bay Fort, which is where the legendary monument once stood. But these new 22 blocks will actually be returned back to the water after all of the studying and scanning is finished. And yeah, if you ever go to Alexandria and have time to go to the Cape Bay Fort, highly recommend that you do, because being able to stand in the spot where the lighthouse once stood there are no words for it. It is just utterly incredible to be there and to witness where this lighthouse once stood and think about how many people's lives were guided into safety for over 1,000 years. Yeah, like I said, no words. Now, I have seen some discourse around this find as well, really along the lines of, why can't the archaeologists, scholars, and the Pharos Project actually just reconstruct the lighthouse as it would have been in the ancient world today? Because other temples, other places have been reconstructed. Other columns are placed back up on their upright position. Temples are reconstructed and more. So why not this one? Well, the short answer is it really comes down to bureaucracy. Different countries have different laws around what you actually are allowed to reconstruct today. And this might not be part of their permit or even their project's purpose. Hence why they are looking to virtually reconstruct it. And by doing so, this actually allows more people to engage with this ancient monument in a way that is more accessible. And the newest stones that were brought above water, well, they actually made up part of the threshold paving, part of the foundational paving, and actually made up part of the giant lintels and upright blocks that once served as the entrance to the lighthouse. And this virtual reconstruction will allow this ancient monument to live again in the digital world. But by creating a precise as possible reconstruction, even digitally, is a little bit hard, especially here. Why? Because there really is no one single iteration of the Lighthouse of Alexandria. So what do I mean by this? Well, it had a long history. So the Lighthouse of Alexandria was actually commissioned under Ptolemy I Soter. Ptolemy I Soter was one of Alexander the Great's trusted generals, and he ended up, after his death, getting Egypt, and he began the Ptolemaic dynasty. So Ptolemy I Soter commissions this piece. It is his successor, Ptolemy II Philadelphus, who sees it actually completed during his lifetime, and it's completed around 247 BCE. Now, there's a few alterations and restorations to the structure, but once we get to the 8th century CE, earthquakes really start to do a number on it. The 8th century and the 10th century sees two massive earthquakes that really rocks this place to its core, literally. And ultimately, it causes severe damage. In the 12th century, more restorations and, in a sense, conservation work begins to be done on it by the Fatimids, during which they also add an Islamic dome on top of it. But by the 15th century, further seismic activity actually turned this structure into a defensive fort, which it has been since then. So what do you guys think about this find? Will you want to see it digitally? Will you want to walk the halls in a virtual manner? Or do you think it should actually be restored in the physical? Now, sticking with Egyptian history and more, we are moving to the south. We're moving to Saqqara for some more tomb news because we learned of a new Egyptian prince this year. Yes, archaeologists working in Saqqara, including Dr. Zahi Hawass, who was actually leading these excavations near where the step pyramid of Djoser lies. Well, this team discovered a 4,400-year-old tomb belonging to a prince who ruled during Egypt's Dynasty V in Egypt's Old Kingdom. Now, in this tomb, we also got beautiful photos about a pink granite false door. So who does this belong to, you may be wondering? Well, none other than Wasser-Ifra. Well, Prince Wasser-Ifra is believed to be the son of the pharaoh Userkaf, who was the first pharaoh of Dynasty V. But Userkaf's successor is actually Sahure. And prior to all of this, we never had a mention of Wasser-Ifra in any king list. We actually didn't even know he existed. But we are learning more and more about him thanks to the inscriptions on the false door. So they name Wasser-Ifra as the hereditary prince. He's also named as a judge. He's also named as a governor and a chanting priest. But let's talk this false door because this one stands at almost 15 feet tall and almost 4 feet wide. And in ancient Egypt, false doors are common in ancient tombs during Egypt's Old Kingdom because during this time, the ancient Egyptians believed that the souls of the deceased could actually travel from the afterlife to their tombs today through the false door. And this is the first time a false door of this magnitude and of pink granite has been discovered in Saqqara. And the stone is also of note because at this time in ancient Egypt, most false doors are made out of limestone. And, well, Wasser-Ifra's tomb has one made of pink granite. And in front of the pink granite false door is a red granite little offering table where food and other offerings could have been left for his soul to consume. But pink granite and red granite, they're not local, nor are they close to Saqqara. The quarry for these is in Aswan, which is about 400 miles south, meaning not only was this material hard to get and not local, but it was super expensive and likely only delegated to those of royalty, the royal family, and the elite. But almost 2,000 years after Wasser-Ifra was laid to rest in his tomb, it was opened. It was opened during Dynasty 26, which is 688 through 525 BCE. Now, we don't know who specifically from Dynasty 26 opened it. Now, it was opened and reused during this time. And what's interesting is that when it was reopened and reused, a black granite statue depicting the pharaoh Djoser from Dynasty 3 and his family was put into this tomb belonging to Wasser-Ifra. Now, this black granite statue has led archaeologists and scholars to believe that it once likely was either put in the step pyramid of Djoser or it was in his larger mortuary complex in front of the step pyramid. Why, you might be asking? We don't know. But this statue of Djoser and his family is really interesting because we don't have much statuary from that period in ancient Egypt. So it's extremely rare, and we didn't even find it in his own tomb. So for those wondering if we have found the body of Wasser-Ifra, his mummy, or sarcophagus, no, currently archaeologists have not discovered it. They are still excavating his tomb. But per Dr. Hawass and the reports that have come out, this find really highlights how important the site of Saqqara was even after Djoser. So yes, during 2026, I will be keeping all of my fingers and toes crossed to see if we get any cool updates about this tomb or even Wasser-Ifra. But from tombs to tales of the past, we are moving to another find that, yes, was released this year in a publication that concerns a new Mesopotamian myth because it was just deciphered. So yes, that's right, new Mesopotamian mythological lore dropped in 2025. In a new study, which yes, is in the show notes for you all, a myth dating back to the early dynastic 3 period, so think 2500 BCE, has been deciphered and examined and finally published. We'll get to that. This tablet, which is known as NI 12501, was excavated from the site of Nippur, which is in modern-day Iraq, and was part of ancient Sumer way back when. And this tablet is not new. we didn't just recently discover this. No, it was excavated and discovered back in the 19th century, where thousands of other tablets were also excavated and discovered from the site. So while we had tablet NI 12501, since its rediscovery back in the 19th century, we never got any publications on it. We never deciphered it, nor was it analyzed. It just sat there. We had images of it, and we see it in other publications where it is numbered, but that was the extent of its publication. And this possibly comes from the fact that it was never studied because it's not a whole tablet. It's extremely fragmentary. And this story of the life of tablet NI 12501 gets even weirder because this tablet was actually used to adorn a publication by Samuel Kramer in 1956. But that's it. On the dust jacket, it's just the image. We didn't even get the number. We had no idea it was tablet NI 12501. No idea. We only knew that it was that tablet when he published a photo of it with its registration number. We only knew it was this tablet when it was published 5 years later with its registration number. So let's talk the tablet and the mythology. So this tablet is believed to have been created around 2400 BCE. During this time in Mesopotamia, the city-states would have had a kind of main deity, a patron deity, if you want to call it that. So for Nippur, the head god or the patron of the town was none other than the king of the gods himself in the Sumerian pantheon, Enlil. And not only is he considered the chief god, but he really rules over storms. So in this myth on the tablet written in Sumerian, we are brought into a scene that is talking about glittering waters filled with fish and even multicolored cattle. Multicolored cow. But these cattle actually belong to Ishkur. And through the story, Ishkur and his cattle actually get taken and they're held captive in the netherworld. Now, Ishkur, like his father, rules over thunderstorms, rain, and more. So, upon finding that his son, Ishkur, is being held captive in the netherworld, Enlil, the good king of the gods, rounds up everybody else in the pantheon and holds council where he's letting every other god and goddess know, hey, my son is missing. We got to do something. Who's got a plan? And when he asks for volunteers to go down and get his son, well, nobody raises their hand. Nobody jumps at this opportunity. Shocker, I know. But rather than a god or goddess raise their hand to venture into the netherworld, well, we see a fox actually raise his hand and tell the king of the gods that he will go down and get his son for him. And this is actually the first time where we see a cunning fox mentioned. So the tablet goes on to tell us that our little fox friend, he actually makes his way into the netherworld, and when he's offered food and drink from there, he actually just stashes it rather than consuming it and therefore trapping himself there as well. But that's really where our story ends. We don't know what happens after. We don't know if our fox friend meets up with Ishkur. We don't know if they leave the netherworld together. Yeah, we're left on a 4,400-year-old cliffhanger. I need more glue. But from this tablet, this is really the only time that the god Ishkur predominantly features. We don't really see him in any other Sumerian myths. But scholars are actually believing that the entire story of a storm god going down to the netherworld, well, that it might be in reference to agricultural cycles, such as the changing of the seasons and the rains that come with them. And these early peoples would have really relied on these seasonal rains, especially because they were in Mesopotamia, known as the land between two rivers. They needed it to survive. Now, while we got this translated and deciphered, until we find another tablet or a more complete version of this, we will not know what occurred between Ishkur and our fox friend. But what do you guys think? Do you think that they got out together? Do you think Enlil praises the fox for going after his son? What do you guys think? And finally, to wrap this season up with the last find, I wanted to end on some ancient art that tells its own story, that of ancient tattoos. This year, an international team of archaeologists and scholars, as well as tattooers, used high-res digital imaging to examine tattoos on an over 2,200-year-old ice mummy from the Paziric culture in Siberia, which now, through a new report, sheds light on prehistoric tattooing for the first time. Now, I talked about the tattoos of the Ice Maiden mummy back in season 1, which, yes, I will be uploading to YouTube over my break. But let's talk about these newer tattoos, because we know that ancient peoples of the past had tattoos. We know people like Utsi had tattoos. A priestess to, I believe, Hathor in Egypt had tattoos. But the lack of surviving evidence makes studying ancient tattoos kind of difficult. But these mummies from the Altai Mountains offer us unique insights into ancient tattooing and their larger culture, because the burial chambers that many of these individuals were placed in were encased in permafrost, which ultimately preserved their skin. And this is fantastic because, again, depending on where you are in the world, there are different rules and regulations for studying ancient tattoos. So for Egypt, I know back when the reports coming out of the lower back tattoos, I think they came out in 2023, I know that there are rules and regulations in Egypt that say you cannot actually unwrap any mummies to see if they do have tattoos. The tattoo actually has to be visible to the naked eye on skin that is already kind of open. And these tattoos from the Paziric culture have long intrigued archaeologists and more. Because, I mean, look at them. They are beautiful artistic designs. Now, while you may have seen this tattoo before, this is from the Ice Maiden mummy, previous studies did not have high-res imaging available, meaning most of the previous studies on ancient tattooing were based on schematic drawings of the tattoos from what could actually be seen with just the naked eye, which led to these studies really trying to understand the larger context of the tattoos rather than the individuals who had the tattoos. So, for this study, archaeologists and scholars produced a three-dimensional scan of one of the mummies using sub-millimeter resolution digital near-infrared photography. And they also partnered with tattoo artists to see what techniques were used, what tools may have been used, and more. And yes, hopefully next season I will be having a friend of the Dirt Diaries podcast on to talk about ancient tattoos and tattoos in general, namely with Viking tattoos, answering the age-old question of did Vikings have tattoos? Take a guess below of who you think it is, and you'll have to wait till next season to see. So the mummy that they actually studied here belonged to a woman who died around the age of 50, but she had beautiful tattoos all over her body. Her hands held tattoos. On the right hand, they had beautiful floral designs. On the left hand, there were also some floral designs, as well as a cruciform figure and a rooster near her thumb. On her left forearm, we see a moose or an elk being attacked by another creature that looks like a griffin. And yes, if you want more on griffins, I did do a whole deep dive on griffins this season. And on her right forearm, we actually see the most detailed tattoo on her body. That includes two antlered ungulates in a struggle with a leopard and two tigers. It's so freaking cool. And the study actually found that the tattoos on her right side of her body were more technical and more detailed than those on her left side, which could suggest different tattoo artists, or if it was the same artist, perhaps it was a tattoo artist who was still new in their career as compared to on the right side where they had advanced a little bit more in their career. So one side could be the apprentice side with the other side being the professional. And this discovery really highlights kind of similarities that we see today in the tattoo world, that of professionals and apprenticeships and how much work goes into it. Now, working with the tattooers, the researchers discovered that these tattoos were created using a hand poking technique, with the larger pieces on her body using a multi-point tool. But to create the finer lines and even the finer details, a single point tool would have been used to be able to achieve those thin lines. And this is just such a cool find altogether. I will be getting a tattoo in my break during my off season here, so I can't wait to come back and show you guys what it is. I will give you guys a hint. It has to do with something that we talked about on season 2. I did mention it, so take your guesses. I'm trying to think of another hint. I will say, as a hint, it comes from the first half of the season, but that's all the hints I'm going to say. Something we covered on Dirt Diaries and from the first half of the season. Take your guesses below. Now on to ranking, because as I always say, not everybody can make varsity, but if I had to pick my favorite find of this entire year, I mean, we got the new tomb, Sanctuary to Odysseus, Dionysus, tattoos, Mesopotamian lore. Final decision, ancient tattoos. Ancient tattoos has to be my top pick of the year. And I think it's my top pick because we have learned so much about tattooing itself, ancient art, and the different techniques that were actually used. And I love the interdisciplinary approach to this project as well. That's something that I absolutely love in the field being done by not only archaeologists, but taking in other individuals who may study ancient art. We're working with tattoo artists. That is fantastic, and that is something that I love to see occur in the field. We need more interdisciplinary research. And I personally want to get ancient art tattooed on myself, or even replicas of ancient tattoos, because it's so fascinating that we can find ourselves getting tattoos today, just like somebody was getting tattooed thousands of years ago. We are still, as I always say, seeing this little thread of humanity throughout these archaeological discoveries that connects us in 2025 to those thousands of years ago. It's these little finds that make me just love archaeology, ancient history, art history, and more. But that is going to do it for this final episode as we shut the tomb and bury 2025. Thank you guys for a spectacular season. Thank you guys so much to each and every one of you on YouTube. I'm trying to build a channel over here. Thank you guys for listening to the audio versions on Spotify, Apple, and more. Truly, I wouldn't be here without you all. And when I got the analytics back for the end of the year, I was utterly blown away. Thank you so much for your support and trying not to cry. And allowing me to nerd out in this little corner of the internet with you all. Thank you so much for being here and just listening to me jibber jabber about stories of the past. Truly, if my younger self could see me now, wow. And thank you guys just for being patient this year, especially when I had to get emergency surgery earlier in 2025. And currently, thank you guys for being just so patient with this final episode as I'm trying to work through this massive hip injury and figure out if I need to actually undergo surgery for it. Just thank you guys for being you at the end of the day. It truly, really makes my day. So for me to you, thank you so much. I cannot wait to see you all back again during season 3. I can't believe I'm heading into season 3. And yeah, let me know below what your favorite archaeological discovery was this entire year. What was your favorite episode this season? Who do you think the guest is? What tattoo do you think I'm gonna get? What guests you want to see on the channel? And more. Or if you didn't have a favorite archaeological find this year, tell me one thing you're proud of accomplishing this year. And spread the joy with each other in all of the comments. So for one last time for 2025, as I always say, stay curious and keep your books open, and I will see you guys next time on the Dirt Diaries.